Your work here has been mediocre at best, Lachlan announced, his voice slicing through the quarterly review meeting. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The projector hummed, casting my name and performance metrics across the wall behind the new VP. 7 years of dedication, reduced to a red downward arrow. I don't see evidence of any meaningful contribution despite your tenure, he continued, lingering on the word as if it were an accusation. My throat constricted. 103 projects successfully delivered. Half the company's daily operations relied on systems I'd created from nothing. Methods that became so embedded in the workflow that people forgot someone had actually built them. Lachlan had been VP of operations for exactly 26 days. Perhaps, he said, tapping his gold watch against the table. It's time you moved on. Someone gasped. Ava from accounting tried catching my eye with a sympathetic glance. On the far side of the conference room, our CEO Radley studied his tablet, apparently fascinated by whatever was on the screen. I've reviewed historical metrics, Lachlan continued, flipping to the next slide. Your output lags behind newer team members with half your experience. Your initiatives lack innovation. Your technical solutions are uninspired. Each word landed like a blow against my chest. I'd stayed late, countless evenings, perfecting those uninspired solutions, while Radley built the company's reputation on their reliability. We need visionaries, Lachlan said, gesturing toward 2 junior developers who joined 6 months ago. People who understand modern approaches. I glanced around the room. These people had called me at midnight when systems crashed. They'd celebrated birthdays with me, sent cards when my mother died. Now they stared at their notepads, their keyboards, anywhere but my face. I stood slowly, gathering the strange calm that comes when your world implodes. The silence stretched as I surveyed the room. Finally, my gaze settled on Radley, who'd finally looked up from his tablet. You'll understand my value soon, I said, the words falling into the quiet room. Something shifted briefly in Radley's expression. Uncertainty, perhaps recognition. Lachlan smirked. Be gone by sundown, he added, with a dismissive gesture. I gathered my belongings in a cardboard box under IT Security's watchful eyes. 7 years of work, memorabilia reduced to a pitiful collection. Kiara from HR hovered nearby, clutching termination papers. This isn't right, Mara, she whispered. Everyone knows what you've built here. I signed where indicated, my signature steady. Apparently not everyone. Concerned colleagues paused by my desk as I packed. Who'll manage the international connections? Jaden asked anxiously. What about the quality standard system? Priya added. Nobody else understands how it works. I gave a slight nod. That's a question for leadership now. Radley watched from the glass-walled executive suite as I walked out. No conversation about transition. No recognition of departing knowledge. 7 years of institutional memory simply walking away. I kept my spine straight until the elevator doors closed. Only then did my hands begin to tremble. Before we continue further, thank you for diving into this story with me. If you're enjoying it so far, please hit that like button and subscribe for more corporate drama stories like this one. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or if you've ever witnessed someone's contributions being overlooked. Now, let's get back to what happened after I walked out of those doors. My name is Mara Finch, and until 3 hours ago, I was the systems integration specialist at Brightline, a company I helped build from a struggling startup to an industry leader. Not that anyone would know it from my title or my paycheck. I'm the person who solves problems nobody else can figure out. The one who creates solutions so seamless, they become invisible. The worker who stays until midnight not for recognition but because leaving something broken is simply not in my nature. My apartment felt strange that afternoon. Too quiet, too bright. For 7 years, I'd only seen it in early mornings and late evenings. Now sunshine poured through windows at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, highlighting dust on surfaces I'd never had time to notice. I poured myself a glass of wine and simply breathed. The story of how I ended up at Brightline began at a tech conference where I met Radley Chen, an ambitious entrepreneur with big ideas, but practical limitations. His startup struggled with integration issues. His development team built impressive individual features, but they didn't work together cohesively. What you need isn't flashier features, I told him after his presentation. You need someone to make your existing pieces function as a unified whole. He hired me the next day. I was employee number 12. In those early years, I tackled impossible challenges that others avoided. My solutions weren't glamorous, but worked so extraordinarily well. They became invisible, dependable foundations everyone simply expected to function. When we landed our first major client, it was my middleware that enabled their legacy systems to communicate with our cutting-edge platform. When we expanded internationally, I created the translation matrices that allowed seamless operation across multiple languages and regulatory frameworks. When our server infrastructure repeatedly crashed under growing demand, I redesigned our entire approach to scaling. None of these achievements came with public recognition or accolades. That wasn't my role. While others presented to clients or demonstrated flashy front-end features, I ensured everything actually worked. My value was in reliability, not spectacle. As the company grew, new management layers formed between me and senior leadership, people who didn't understand what I'd built or how crucial it was to daily operations. People like Lachlan. He arrived from a competitor with grand promises of transformation and next-level thinking. His first act was evaluating every department for optimization opportunities. His second was systematically dismissing anyone whose contributions weren't immediately visible on quarterly reports. I became an obvious target. My salary represented 7 years of modest increases. My projects rarely generated direct revenue. They enabled other teams to succeed. On paper, to someone who didn't understand our systems, I looked dispensable. For weeks after my departure, I rediscovered forgotten pleasures. I watched sunrises with coffee instead of debugging code. I reconnected with friends who'd stopped inviting me places. I remembered how life felt beyond corporate walls. Then the messages started arriving from former teammates. The international portal keeps crashing. Nobody knows why. The quality standards automation is giving bizarre results. Lachlan's furious. Half the development team is working weekends trying to figure out your systems. Not through any deliberate sabotage, not through withheld information. I documented everything meticulously. But because truly effective systems require something beyond written instructions, the contextual understanding that exists only in their creator's mind. Waking up without anxiety felt strange after so many years. I started taking walks in the morning, applied for positions at companies where my skills might be valued, even considered starting my own consultancy. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Priya. "You should see what's happening here." She sent a link to a business news article. Brightline had missed their quarterly targets by a substantial margin. An important client had publicly complained about system failures. Their stock had dropped 18% in a single day. Due to unforeseen technical challenges, Radley explained to concerned stakeholders in a quote, "I felt no satisfaction in their struggles. These were people I'd worked alongside for years, friends whose livelihoods depended on the company's success. But I also felt no responsibility to rescue them from a situation they'd created." 3 weeks later, I received an interview offer from Brightline's main competitor. The role came with a director title and nearly double my previous salary. I scheduled it for the following Monday. That Sunday evening, my phone displayed Radley's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Mara," he said, his typically confident voice subdued. "How are you?" "Surprisingly well," I replied honestly. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. "We've encountered some difficulties," he finally continued. "I've heard. The VP who made that unfortunate decision is no longer with us." Lachlan had lasted less than 2 months. I felt a flicker of vindication but kept my voice neutral. "That's unfortunate." The silence hung between us, heavy with unspoken tension. I listened to Radley's breathing on the other end of the line, waiting. "Let him work for this conversation. We need your expertise," he finally admitted. "The board has authorized me to make a substantial offer for your return." I sat at my kitchen counter, tracing patterns in the condensation on my water glass. 7 years of dedication, erased in a 20-minute meeting, and now they wanted me back because things were falling apart. "What's your offer?" I asked, my tone deliberately neutral. He named a figure 20% higher than my previous salary, a modest title upgrade, potential equity options after a year. "That's interesting," I replied, "but insufficient." "Mara, be reasonable." I was reasonable for 7 years, Radley. Reasonable about my compensation, reasonable about credit for my work, reasonable when you brought in Lachlan without consulting anyone who actually understood our operations. My voice remained calm, but each word carried the weight of accumulated grievances. "I'm done being reasonable. I stated my requirements, triple my previous compensation, executive authority over technical operations, and public acknowledgement of my historical contributions to the company. That's considerable, he responded, discomfort evident. Actually, it's entirely fair, I replied. You're not paying for future work. You're compensating me for what I've already created that nobody else understands fully. The board will never. Then find someone else to fix your systems, I interrupted. Though, I suspect you've already tried. Another long pause. I could almost feel him calculating the cost of continued failures against meeting my demands. I have an interview with Lumina tomorrow, I added, mentioning their biggest competitor. Their offer is quite generous already. Don't make any decisions until Wednesday, he said quickly. I need to convene the board. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the window. The woman looking back seemed different, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer. 7 days ago, I would have accepted that initial offer with gratitude. Now I understood my true worth. The interview with Lumina went exceptionally well. Their technical director actually understood my contributions to Brightline's systems. He'd been trying to replicate several of them for years. They offered a director position on the spot with a comprehensive package that nearly matched my demands to Radley. We need an answer by Friday, the Lumina CEO said, shaking my hand. Tuesday passed without word from Brightline. Wednesday morning arrived with silence. By afternoon, I began mentally preparing for life at Lumina. Then at 4:37 p.m., Radley called. We accept your terms, he said without preamble. All of them. I felt a curious mixture of vindication and unexpected sadness. Send over the paperwork. There's one additional request, he added. The board wants you to start immediately. Tomorrow, if possible. Monday, I countered. I need time to prepare. Things are urgent, Mara. They became urgent the moment Lachlan decided I was dispensable, I replied. Monday is quite soon enough. The employment contract arrived within the hour. Triple my previous salary. Senior Vice President of Technical Operations. A seat on the executive leadership team. Public acknowledgement of my contributions. Everything in writing. Signed by Radley and the board chairman. I signed and returned it, then poured myself a glass of wine in celebration. Not of returning to Brightline, but of finally being valued appropriately. The announcement circulated Monday morning. My return described as a critical leadership acquisition with detailed acknowledgement of my essential historical contributions to Brightline's core infrastructure. Every person who had witnessed my dismissal received this message, alongside news of my executive package and reporting structure. Walking into the building felt surreal. The same security guard greeted me, but instead of my old badge, he handed me an executive access card. The same elevator carried me upward, but I exited on the executive floor rather than the technical department. The same people nodded as I passed, but their expressions carried new respect. Or was it wariness? Kiara from HR met me at the door to my new office. An actual office with windows, not the cubicle I'd occupied for years. Welcome back, she said, her smile genuine. Your team is assembled in conference room A, whenever you're ready. My team? Yes, the Technical Operations Division. 23 people total, including the new hires Radley approved this weekend. She handed me a folder. Their profiles are all here. You have complete authority to reorganize as you see fit. The reality of my new position began sinking in. This wasn't just about fixing what had broken in my absence. This was actual leadership authority. In conference room A, nervous faces greeted me. Some familiar colleagues, some new hires, all waiting to see who exactly I'd become after my public dismissal and triumphant return. Good morning, I began, surveying the room. Most of you know me. Some don't. For 7 years, I built and maintained the systems that form the backbone of this company. Now, we're going to rebuild what's been broken and create something stronger. Jaden raised his hand tentatively. Is it true? The Aurora project failed completely after you left? The Aurora project, our largest client implementation, had been my last major architecture before Lachlan arrived. It didn't fail, I corrected. It was failed by poor leadership decisions that removed its principal architect without transition planning. I opened my tablet and projected the current system status. Now, let's see what we're working with. The first week passed in a blur of diagnostics and repairs. Critical systems had degraded without proper maintenance. Stopgap fixes had created new problems. Half-implemented changes initiated under Lachlan had corrupted core functions. By Friday, we'd stabilized the most urgent issues. I worked alongside my team, hands-on with the code, showing rather than telling. When we resolved the issues plaguing the Aurora project at 10 p.m. Friday night, spontaneous applause broke out in the development room. "First round's on me," I announced, and we relocated to a nearby bar to celebrate. Priya clinked glasses with me as the others chatted excitedly about plans to rebuild the international portal. "You know what's strange?" she said quietly. "Radley hasn't interfered once. Not a single executive directive or modification request." "That was in my contract," I replied. "Complete technical autonomy." "Smart," she nodded. "But that's not all of it. He seems different since you returned. Watchful, almost nervous." I considered this. Executives don't like being proven wrong publicly. "Maybe." She studied me. "What are you really after, Mara? Revenge for how they treated you?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. What did I want? The validation of return? The satisfaction of proving my worth? Something deeper? "I want what I've always wanted," I finally answered. "To build something that works properly." But as I said it, I recognized the half-truth. There was something else brewing beneath my calm exterior. A plan forming that I hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. The second week brought my first executive leadership meeting. I sat at the gleaming conference table, now a peer to those who'd previously barely acknowledged my existence. Radley presided with his usual charisma, but I noticed how his gaze frequently darted to me throughout the presentations. The chief financial officer presented quarterly projections showing recovery after the recent troubles. The VP of sales detailed renewed client confidence. The chief marketing officer outlined aggressive plans to regain market share lost during the system's failures. "And now," Radley said, "I'd like our new SVP of Technical Operations to share her assessment and plans." All eyes turned to me, some curious, some wary, some openly skeptical. The weight of expectation hung in the air. I opened my presentation slowly, methodically, not with technical diagrams or recovery metrics, but with a 7-year timeline of Brightline's growth. Each major client acquisition, each significant feature launch, each technological breakthrough. Beside each milestone, I displayed the underlying technical architecture that had made it possible. Systems I had designed and implemented, largely without credit. "Our recent failures weren't accidents," I explained calmly. "They were the inevitable result of removing the person who understood how these interconnected systems function as a whole." Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Radley's expression remained carefully neutral. "Moving forward," I continued, "we have two choices. We can patch the existing systems, a temporary solution that will require constant maintenance, or we can rebuild properly with appropriate resources and recognition for the architects." "What's your recommendation?" asked the CFO. "Rebuilding is the only sustainable path," I replied. "But it requires something Brightline has historically lacked: transparency about who creates value and appropriate compensation for their contributions." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. "Are you proposing structural changes beyond your department?" Radley asked carefully. "I'm proposing a culture change," I answered, meeting his gaze directly. "One that prevents us from ever again discarding someone whose value we've failed to recognize." The tension in the room was palpable. I'd pushed boundaries, made implicit criticisms explicit, but something told me this was merely the opening move in a larger game, one where I finally held cards worth playing. As we adjourned, Radley asked me to remain behind. The door closed, leaving us alone in the large conference room. "That was quite a presentation," he said, his tone unreadable. "Just establishing context," I replied. He studied me for a long moment. "What's your actual plan here, Mara? Beyond the contract terms and system repairs?" I met his gaze steadily. "You'll understand that soon enough." His expression flickered with something between concern and curiosity. "I'm beginning to think bringing you back might have unexpected consequences." "Most valuable things do," I replied simply, gathering my materials. "See you tomorrow, Radley." As I walked to my office, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk about what really happened with Lachlan. Not everyone at Brightline is who they appear to be. Meet me at Riverside Park, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone." I stared at the cryptic message, my fingers hovering over the screen. Anonymous messages inviting people to secluded locations rarely ended well in movies. Then again, Riverside Park was hardly secluded. It was a popular evening spot filled with joggers and dog walkers until well after dark. Curiosity won. If someone had information about Lachlan, that they couldn't share inside Brightline's walls. I needed to hear it. The spring evening was mild, cherry blossoms scattering across the walking path as I approached our meeting spot. I'd chosen casual clothes, jeans and a light sweater, wanting to appear approachable rather than in executive mode. A woman sat alone on a bench overlooking the water, her profile vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. As I approached, she turned, and recognition clicked into place. Vivian, Radley's executive assistant for the past 3 years. "Thank you for coming," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I wasn't sure you would." "Your message was intriguing," I replied, taking a seat beside her. "What's this about, Lachlan?" She pulled a small tablet from her bag, fingers trembling slightly as she unlocked it. "Lachlan didn't choose you for dismissal at random. And he wasn't just incompetent, he was deliberately sabotaging specific projects." "Why would he do that?" I asked, skepticism edging my voice. "Because he never actually worked for Brightline." She handed me the tablet. "At least, not exclusively." The screen displayed a private email thread between Lachlan and an external address. I scrolled through, my blood pressure rising with each message. Detailed reports on Brightline's proprietary systems, assessments of vulnerable points in our architecture, lists of key personnel to neutralize, with my name at the top. "He was working for Lumina," I whispered, the realization crashing over me. "Corporate espionage." Vivian nodded gravely. "Not just gathering intelligence, active sabotage. He was brought in to weaken Brightline from within, target key systems, remove essential personnel, create openings for Lumina to exploit in the market. And Radley hired him without proper vetting." She hesitated, glancing around again before leaning closer. "That's where it gets complicated. The board insisted on Lachlan's appointment, overrode Radley's concerns." "The board?" My mind raced through implications. Why would they? 3 board members have investments in Lumina through shell companies, she interrupted. "I discovered it accidentally while preparing materials for last quarter's board meeting." "Keep scrolling." I swiped through more documents, financial records showing the connections, calendar invites for private meetings between Lachlan and 2 board members, strategy notes outlining a controlled decline of Brightline's market position. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, suddenly wary. "Why not take it to Radley?" Her expression darkened. "Because I don't know who to trust anymore. Radley's been acting strangely since before Lachlan arrived. Closed-door meetings, encrypted communications. He claims he opposed Lachlan's hiring, but I've seen messages suggesting otherwise." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. If this information was accurate, Brightline wasn't just suffering from poor management decisions. It was being deliberately undermined from within. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "You're the only executive without connections to either faction. Your systems keep this company running, and you have a personal stake in exposing whoever was behind your dismissal." She met my gaze directly. "I need an ally I can trust." I considered her words carefully. Trust was in short supply these days, and she was asking for mine, with only digital evidence that could potentially be fabricated. "I'll look into this," I said finally, "but I need time to verify independently." She nodded, seemingly relieved. "That's all I ask. Be careful who you confide in." As I walked home, my mind churned with possibilities. If Vivian's information was accurate, my return to Brightline had placed me in the center of a corporate war I hadn't known was being fought. My dismissal hadn't been about my performance. It had been strategic elimination of a obstacle. But who was really pulling the strings? Rogue board members? Radley himself? External forces I hadn't identified? The next day, I began subtle investigations. Nothing that would trigger alarms, just careful probing of system logs and access patterns. Who had been reviewing which portions of our architecture? Which projects had received unusual scrutiny during Lachlan's brief tenure? What I found confirmed portions of Vivian's claims. Lachlan had indeed focused his attention on our most innovative systems, the ones that gave us competitive advantage. He had systematically removed or reassigned personnel who understood these systems best, starting with me. But something still didn't add up. If Lachlan had been working for Lumina, why had they offered me a position so quickly after my departure from Brightline? Was I being recruited as an unwitting accomplice? Or was someone at Lumina running a separate operation? I needed more information before confronting anyone. Accusations of corporate sabotage without ironclad evidence would only undermine my newly established position, or worse, mark me as the next target. Over the next week, I rebuilt trust with my technical team while quietly gathering intelligence. I revamped security protocols under the guise of system improvements. I implemented subtle tracking measures in key systems to monitor unusual access patterns. I cultivated relationships with assistants and support staff who might have observed unusual behaviors. Meanwhile, I played my executive role perfectly, attending meetings, delivering progress reports, participating in strategic discussions. If anyone suspected my parallel investigation, they gave no indication. Then came the breakthrough. Late one evening, as I worked alone in my office, my monitoring alert pinged softly. Someone was accessing our client database using Radley's credentials at 11:24 p.m., when Radley was supposedly at a charity gala across town. I'd seen the social media posts of his arrival less than 30 minutes ago. I traced the access point, a private terminal in our secure development area, where few had authorization after hours. I pulled up the security camera feed and froze. There sat Bennett, chairman of the board, methodically reviewing our most sensitive client information. He wasn't just browsing, he was systematically downloading contact details for our highest value clients. I captured the footage and data trail, then quietly logged the activity in my secure private server. One piece of the puzzle, but a significant one. The next morning, Radley called an emergency executive meeting. His expression was grim as we assembled. "We have a situation," he announced once the door closed. 3 of our top clients received solicitations from Lumina yesterday, offering migration services with insider knowledge of their specific configurations on our platform. Murmurs of concern filled the room. "This isn't a coincidence," Radley continued. "Someone with intimate knowledge of our client implementations is feeding information to our competitor." His gaze swept the room, lingering momentarily on each executive. When it reached me, I maintained perfect composure despite my racing thoughts. "I've authorized a comprehensive security audit," he declared, "beginning immediately. All system access will be logged and reviewed, all external communications monitored." My pulse quickened. A security audit would inevitably uncover my own covert monitoring systems. I needed to act quickly. "I have information that may be relevant," I said, drawing all eyes to me, "but I would prefer to discuss it privately first." Radley's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, we'll meet after this session." The meeting continued with discussion of damage control measures, but tension hung in the air. I'd made a calculated risk, revealing that I had information without specifying what it was. Now I needed to navigate the fallout carefully. When the room cleared, Radley closed the door and turned to me. "What information?" "Mara," I measured my words carefully. "I've observed unusual access patterns in our systems, not from external threats, but from within Brightline." His expression remained neutral. "Go on. Someone used your credentials last night to access client data, while you were verifiably elsewhere." A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his features. "That's impossible. My authentication requires biometric confirmation." "Nevertheless, it happened. I have the logs." He sank into a chair, expression troubled. "Show me." I pulled up the sanitized logs, enough to demonstrate the breach without revealing my monitoring system. "I haven't identified who yet, but they're using executive credentials to extract sensitive information." "Why didn't you bring this to security immediately?" His tone carried accusation. "Because I don't know how far this compromise extends," I replied evenly. "After what happened with Lachlan, I've been cautious about who to trust." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps even respect. "You think this connects to Lachlan's actions?" "I think Lachlan's brief tenure here was part of a larger strategy. His dismissing me wasn't random. It was calculated to remove someone who might detect system vulnerabilities being exploited." Radley studied me intently. "You've been investigating this since your return." "It wasn't a question." I nodded. "Without authorization. Without interference," I corrected. "My contract grants me technical autonomy." A tense silence stretched between us before he spoke again. "What else have you discovered?" I considered my options carefully. Revealing everything would leave me vulnerable if Radley himself was involved. Revealing nothing would waste a potential alliance if he wasn't. "Enough to know the breach extends to board level," I finally said, "but not enough to identify everyone involved." His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with calculation. "How do I know you're not part of this? Your dismissal and triumphant return could have been staged. Your interview with Lumina, suspiciously convenient. You don't. I acknowledged, just as I don't know if your apparent surprise is genuine or performance. We had reached an impasse, two executives with reason to suspect each other, neither willing to reveal their full hand. "What do you propose?" he finally asked. "A controlled test," I replied. "Feed different information through different channels. See which pieces reach Lumina. That would require involving others in our suspicions." "Not necessarily. You and I could manage the entire operation." He considered this, fingers drumming lightly on the table. "If you're right about board involvement, this is extremely dangerous territory, Mara. I'm aware. And if you're wrong, or if you're misleading me, it's career suicide. Also aware." Our eyes locked in silent assessment. Finally, he nodded once. "Set it up, but this stays exclusively between us until we have conclusive evidence." As I left his office, uncertainty churned within me. Had I just formed an alliance with a trustworthy CEO, or handed ammunition to the orchestrator of a corporate conspiracy? Either way, I'd committed to a path that would irrevocably alter Brightline and my future within it. That evening, a text arrived from Vivian. "Bennett accessed R's computer yesterday. Be careful. Things are accelerating." I stared at my reflection in the darkened window of my apartment. The woman looking back was caught in a web of corporate intrigue far beyond what I'd imagined when I'd stated my 5 words of defiance. "You'll understand my value soon." Little did I know then just how that understanding would come about. The next morning, I implemented my plan. Working with Radley, cautiously, I created 3 distinct bait projects in our development system. Each contained seemingly valuable but actually harmless proprietary information. Each was accessible through different channels and visible to different segments of leadership. Project Cardinal could only be viewed through Radley's access path. Project Sapphire was visible to the technical executive team. Project Horizon was accessible to board members only. I embedded unique, traceable markers in each project's data structure, digital fingerprints that would reveal themselves if the information appeared elsewhere. Then I waited. Meanwhile, I continued strengthening our actual systems. My team worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been damaged during my absence, morale improving as they saw genuine progress. The company began stabilizing, client confidence returning, metrics improving. 2 weeks passed. I maintained my vigilant monitoring while presenting a perfect facade of executive integration. Radley and I had daily check-ins regarding our trap projects, careful to disguise them as routine development reviews. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my alert system triggered. Project Horizon, the board-level bait, had been accessed at 3:17 a.m. from Bennett's private terminal. By noon, elements of its proprietary algorithm had appeared in a confidential pitch Lumina was preparing for one of our wavering clients. I summoned Radley to my office, reverse of our usual meeting pattern, a power move I made, deliberately. "We have confirmation," I said without preamble, showing him the evidence. "Bennett is feeding information to Lumina. The question is whether he's acting alone." Radley studied the data, expression hardening. "This is definitive, but confronting a chairman without board support is suicide, which is why we don't confront him yet." I pulled up our company's articles of incorporation on my screen. "We build an airtight case first. That could take weeks. Meanwhile, he continues undermining us. Not if we accelerate our timeline." I outlined my next steps. A more aggressive strategy than our careful approach thus far. We feed him exactly what we want Lumina to see. Radley's eyes widened with understanding. "Disinformation, precisely." I smiled thinly. "Let's see how Lumina responds to implementing some spectacular failures." Over the next week, we executed our plan meticulously. Project Horizon received updates containing fatally flawed algorithms, innovations that would appear breakthrough initially, but catastrophically fail under real-world conditions. Bennett took the bait, accessing the information during early morning hours when he thought no one was monitoring. Meanwhile, I expanded my investigation. If Bennett was compromised, who else might be? I traced communication patterns, financial transactions, meeting schedules, building a comprehensive map of potential conspirators. The results shocked even my cynical expectations. 3 board members, including Bennett, the recently departed Lachlan, and 2 current executives showed clear connections to Lumina through various channels. They'd been systematically weakening Brightline from within, positioning Lumina to absorb our failing company at a fraction of its value. But the most surprising discovery came buried in encrypted communications on our backup servers. Radley himself had known about the infiltration far longer than he'd admitted to me. He hadn't initiated it, but he'd recognized it months ago and chosen strategic inaction. Why? The answer came in further communications. Radley was playing a longer game. Rather than exposing the conspiracy immediately, he'd been gathering evidence while appearing oblivious. His plan had been progressing methodically until Lachlan, overeager and unaware of Radley's knowledge, had accelerated matters by dismissing me. My return had forced Radley's timeline forward. He'd needed me to fix the systems Lachlan had damaged, but he hadn't anticipated my own investigation running parallel to his. Now we were both aware of each other's knowledge, circling warily like chess players who've recognized an unexpected master across the board. I called Vivian. We need to talk. Not in the park this time. We met at a small cafe far from Brightline's offices. Her nervousness had increased visibly since our last meeting. Radley knows, she said immediately. He asked me about our communication yesterday. What did you tell him? That I've been keeping you informed of unusual activities, as any good assistant would do for a senior executive. She fidgeted with her napkin. He seemed to accept it, but he's watching me more closely now. You need to continue exactly as before, I instructed. Don't change any patterns. If Radley truly suspects you, altered behavior will only confirm it. And you? She asked. What's your next move? I considered how much to reveal. Vivian had proven reliable thus far, but complete transparency remained risky. I'm gathering final evidence, I said carefully. When it's complete, we'll act decisively. Against Bennett? Against everyone involved in undermining this company, I replied, including those who knew and chose inaction. Her eyes widened slightly. Be careful, Mara. These people destroy careers, and worse, when threatened. I smiled grimly. They already tried destroying mine. That didn't work out as planned. The quarterly board meeting arrived, the perfect stage for the final act of this corporate drama. 2 days before, I sent Radley a comprehensive briefing detailing everything I'd discovered, including his own early awareness of the conspiracy. My message was simple. We could proceed together or as adversaries, but proceedings were now inevitable. His response came 6 hours later. Together. My office, 7 a.m. tomorrow. We met in the pale light of early morning, the executive floor still empty, except for security. You've been thorough, Radley said, gesturing to my report on his desk. More than I expected. That seems to be a recurring theme with me, I replied evenly. He acknowledged this with a slight nod. What do you want, Mara? Truly want, beyond exposing this conspiracy? The question caught me off guard with its directness. What did I want? Vindication? Advancement? Justice? I want what I said in that meeting when Lachlan dismissed me, I answered finally. For everyone to understand my value, not just as a technical architect, but as someone who builds systems that last, including business systems with proper accountability. And if achieving that means significant changes to Brightline's leadership structure, then those changes are overdue. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded decisively. I agree. Here's what I propose. The board meeting began at 10 a.m. sharp. 14 members seated around the gleaming table, Bennett at its head, Radley to his right. I sat halfway down, seemingly just another executive presenting quarterly technical updates. Bennett called the meeting to order with practiced authority, proceeding through standard agenda items with efficient precision, financial reports, market positioning, competitive analysis. Then Radley requested the floor for an unscheduled presentation. Before we continue, he said, standing, I believe we have a matter of corporate governance to address. Bennett's expression flickered with momentary concern before settling into polite interest. The agenda is quite full, Radley. Perhaps this could wait for committee review? I'm afraid not, Radley replied, nodding to me. This directly impacts Brightline's immediate future. I connected my tablet to the display system. The room darkened as the presentation screen illuminated with a single stark image. Bennett accessing Project Horizon at 3:17 a.m. What is this? Bennett demanded, voice sharp. Evidence, I replied calmly, of systematic corporate espionage and sabotage orchestrated from within this room. Chaos erupted. Bennett attempting to adjourn the meeting, other implicated board members rising in protest, the remaining directors demanding explanations. Through it all, Radley and I stood calmly at the center of the storm we'd unleashed. When order finally restored, I methodically presented our findings: access logs, communication records, financial connections, the deliberate weakening of Brightline's position to benefit Lumina, the strategic elimination of personnel, including myself, who might have detected the scheme earlier. "This is absurd," Bennett sputtered. "Fabricated evidence from a disgruntled employee you never should have rehired." "Actually," I smiled thinly, "that dismissal was your conspirator's most significant miscalculation." I switched slides to display Lachlan's original assessment of me, the confidential report that had preceded my public humiliation. "Subject demonstrates dangerous potential to identify system vulnerabilities. Maintains comprehensive understanding of interconnected architectures. Recommend immediate removal before detection possible." The room fell silent as implications sank in. "My dismissal wasn't about performance," I continued. "It was about eliminating the person most likely to discover your scheme. But instead of disappearing quietly, I came back with executive access and a mandate to investigate exactly the systems you were exploiting." Bennett's face had gone ashen. "This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene after legal review of these allegations." "Actually," Radley interjected smoothly, "we've already consulted legal counsel and the SEC and federal prosecutors specializing in corporate espionage." The trap closed. External investigators entered the boardroom, accompanied by corporate counsel. 3 board members, including Bennett, were escorted out for immediate questioning. The remaining directors sat in stunned silence as Radley outlined the transition plan we'd developed. "Effective immediately, Bennett and the implicated directors are suspended pending investigation. I will continue as CEO with expanded oversight from non-compromised board members, and Mara Finch will assume the position of Chief Operating Officer, with particular focus on restructuring our governance systems to prevent future vulnerabilities." Murmurs of shock rippled through the room. It wasn't just technical systems I would be rebuilding. It was the entire operational structure of Brightline itself. As the meeting concluded in subdued discussion of next steps, Radley approached me privately. "Spectacular execution," he said quietly, "though I notice you omitted my early awareness from your presentation." "Strategic decision," I replied. "The company needs stability during transition. 2 adversaries can become allies when facing a greater threat. And now that the threat is neutralized," I smiled, "now we rebuild something better. Together, if your intentions align with mine." He extended his hand. "To new beginnings, COO Finch." 3 months later, Brightline had transformed. With Bennett and his co-conspirators facing federal charges, we'd restructured both our technical systems and corporate governance. Transparency initiatives, equitable recognition programs, advancement based on measurable contribution rather than politics. The Aurora project had relaunched successfully. Client confidence had fully restored. Our stock had rebounded beyond pre-crisis levels. In my new corner office, I sometimes reflected on the journey, from undervalued technical specialist to company leadership. My revenge hadn't been destruction. It hadn't even been the public vindication of my return. It had been something far more satisfying, rebuilding the company in my own image, creating systems of lasting value that recognize the contributions of everyone involved. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't what you destroy, but what you create in the aftermath of betrayal. Thank you so much for staying with this story until the end. If you enjoyed Mara's journey from undervalued employee to powerful executive, please hit that like button and subscribe for more corporate revenge stories. Have you ever witnessed someone's contributions being overlooked until they were gone? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more stories about workplace justice, let me know what situations you'd like to see explored next.